When you're diving in the advanced open water range, so about 100 feet or 30 meters deep, the two things that tend to limit your dive the most are the gas volume in your cylinder and that no decompression limit, or NDL, on your dive computer. Now, we can always go buy bigger tanks or get more and more efficient on the cylinder that we have with our sac rate to where we're not using as much gas, but that NDL is always going to be a problem. And if we were to exceed that no decompression limit, now we have mandatory stops on our way to the surface, and we're not able to go directly to the surface in the event that something goes wrong. And if you're an experienced diver and that NDL is starting to frustrate you and you really just want to go past it and you want to stay down longer and see more, then you should start looking at decompression diving. Now, decompression divers are prepared for that mandatory ascent. They have certain equipment, planning, team procedures, as well as training, and those four things go into making that decompression diver prepared for doing a dive with a mandatory ceiling, a mandatory stop depth that they can't surpass and go straight to the surface. There's a little bit of personal risk assessment as well as independence that goes into this, but if you're an experienced diver and you're starting to get frustrated with those no decompression limits, or you want to see a shipwreck or a reef that's just outside of your current diving limits, then you should start looking at doing a decompression diving. So I'm a technical diving instructor and I get a lot of questions on the entry-level decompression classes. And that's something that I teach. It's something that I do quite a bit of for fun as well. I want to go over what these classes actually are, what you should expect to learn from them, what you should have dialed in before you show up, common issues that people have, and places and areas in the world that these classes can be conducted. So we'll start with the class themselves. Now, if you're an experienced diver, you're looking to get into decompression diving, the first thing on your list is equipment. You need to be really dialed in with either back-mounted doubles or side-mounted cylinders before you start doing dives with a mandatory decompression. Before we go over those things, here's a couple of quick notes on decompression diving. When we're doing decompression dives, we can't go all the way to the surface. We have what we call a ceiling, and that's a depth which we can't go above. And what we're doing there is our slow ascent, we're allowing inert gases to come out of our system to reduce our risk of decompression sickness. In cave diving, we have rocks over our head. We have to swim out of the cave before we can get to the surface. In decompression diving, we have a decompression ceiling over our head, so we have to wait at that depth until we can go to the surface. Now that means decompression divers have to be able to solve problems underwater, which is where redundancy comes into play. We've got to have backups on top of backups, and we have to have procedures to use our buddy and our backup systems in case something goes wrong. So if you've done some Googling, you've probably seen advanced nitrox, Tech 45, technical diver, all kinds of different names from different agencies for the entry-level decompression course. Now, I'm going to talk about courses in the TDI sphere because I'm a TDI instructor. And TDI has two main programs, and they're comprised of 3 different courses. And that may sound a little confusing, but I'm going to break it down. Advanced nitrox, decompression procedures, and helotrox are the 3 separate courses that make up the tech diving programs. And we can combo those in 2 different ways. We can have advanced nitrox and Deco procedures, or advanced nitrox and helotrox. Now, the difference between those programs is that helotrox allows us to use a little bit of trimix, and that's going to reduce our narcosis at those deeper depths. In my opinion, the helotrox program is much better. Having a little bit of trimix for dives in the 130 to 150 range is awesome. It reduces our gas density, it reduces our narcosis. It's definitely preferred. In situations where we are diving shallower or we don't have access to trimix for those kind of dives, the decompression procedures course works great. In my mind, the easiest way to break this down is we have 2 classes, ANDP and AN helotrox. We already know the difference in graduation abilities. One allows a little bit of trimix, the other does not. But the reason that that's split up into different courses is advanced nitrox gives us a certification that shows the dive shop we can use 100% oxygen. Our normal nitrox course is 22 to 40% oxygen. Advanced nitrox gets us from 40 to 100%. And then the second part of those combo programs is the ability to do decompression, and that gets us on the boat when we want to show the boat that we're qualified to do decompression dives. The added bonus of the helotrox card is that it allows the dive shop to know that, hey, we can get a little bit of trimix as well. Now, we shouldn't think of these as separate programs. You don't go take an advanced nitrox course and then you can dive with 100% oxygen and then later on take a decompression course so you can do decompression diving. It should be thought of as one program, and those are the two certifications that you get. The reason that they're two separate certifications is that whole gas card and dive ability, so dive shop versus dive boat ability. There's definitely more efficient C card processes out there than having them split up. But if we think of it as two programs, one allows a little trimix and one doesn't. And within those two programs, we've got that gas card component and that dive ability component. That's just the easiest way I know to break it down. Now, when we talk about what we're going to learn in these programs, I'm going to use the term Deco diver, and that's going to be an umbrella term for both advanced nitrox and decompression procedures and advanced nitrox and helitrox. Those are both our entry-level decompression diver courses. The first step with each of those classes is to really have our equipment dialed in. Whether we're diving side mount or back mounted doubles, we need to be extremely proficient in that configuration with buoyancy control, with trim, our ability to manipulate our valves and our regulators, and our awareness of what's going on with our own equipment, with our dive buddies' equipment, and with the environment around us. As far as things that we learn that are new from either of these programs go, we can break that down into three segments. The first is decompression theory. What's going on in our dive computer and our dive planning app, and how do we understand that? The second is risks. We have to understand, accept, and mitigate the additional risks that come with this kind of diving. And the third is dive planning. We need to know how to plan a dive well, how to do it efficiently, and how to plan for any kind of contingencies that are realistic that we may encounter. As far as underwater skills go, there's really only two new skills that should be introduced in this course. And I'll put a little asterisk beside this, which I'll address later. Those two skills are our ability to do stops as a team on a schedule. So that's stopping on the ascent, which is really just buoyancy control. And the second is doing a team gas switch. All right, that's switching onto our decompression gas as part of our dive plan. Now, there's plenty of emergency skills, but as far as normal dive skills, those are the two. Hovering at a specific depth, doing a team gas switch. Our emergency skills encompass all kinds of contingencies and out of gas scenarios that we run through during the course. Now, I put that asterisk there because those two being the only new skills that appear, that's contingent on us having a really solid skill set from our intro to tech or our tech side mount class before we move into the Deco class. And that's a great transition into the second thing that we wanted to talk about, which is what do we need to have coming into this class to be set up for success? Buoyancy control. We need to be able to hold a stop at a specific depth for an indefinite period of time comfortably. And equipment familiarity. We need to be really comfortable shutting down and turning off our valves, manipulating our regulators, and just understanding how and why our equipment is set up the way that it is. Intro to tech classes, tech side mount classes, those are awesome, especially if they're taken with somebody who's doing regular technical dives at the level that you're interested in doing, but there's no substitute for experience and configuration. Get out of that classroom setting after you finish the class successfully and go dive with other people that are your peers. That's going to give you a lot of comfort in the equipment and comfort diving with new and different people. I'd say the most common question that I get when people are signing up for the Deco class is, hey, how do I not fail? I want to pass. Like, what makes people fail? And that's a really interesting question to me, because if you've taken an intro to tech class and you've gone and gotten some experience and you have the ability to look around and understand what's going on, and you have the ability to hover in a fixed position at a fixed depth, and you can shoot lift bags, then you should be prepared and ready for this course. But what sets people up for success in a decompression class so they can leave that class and go do deco dives for fun because they have passed? Well, first off is those underwater abilities. We've got to have the ability to have that awareness and to have that gear comfort, but we also need to have some really important surface abilities. The first of which is to remember that we're in a training environment. In a training environment, you should expect feedback. You should expect to do stuff wrong and get feedback on that and then fix it. That's part of learning, and that's part of taking a class. So definitely have an open mind as you're going in. And the second thing, which is probably the most important, is remember that it's not just a class. You should be learning new things and adopting new procedures as part of this course that you later take to Deco Dive. This isn't a show up, kneel on the bottom, run through a couple of skills, here's your card, now go figure it out on your own and develop your own methods. Like, there is importance and independence in developing your own methods and procedures, but you should expect to get procedures from this class and get knowledge from this class and apply it to future dives. It is not just checking the boxes to get a new piece of plastic. Furthermore, if you don't plan to go do decompression dives after the course, then don't do a decompression course. If you wait a year after your class to go do your first Deco Dives post-certification, you might as well have not done the class because you're going to forget a ton of really important information. And at that point, it's almost like you need a decompression refresher. Let's get back to that question. Why do people fail the class? Now, this question is really interesting to me, and there's a little bit of semantics involved. Very few people fail the courses that I teach. A lot of people do not finish the courses that I teach, and there is a difference between those two. Failing a class is typically a safety or an attitude issue. If you're unsafe to everyone around you and you're not taking feedback the way that you need to be, if you are just there to get a checkbox and after the class you're going to go dive by yourself in a single tank and all kinds of other things that we know are not a good idea, then yeah, it's probably goodbye, you have failed the program, do not come back. Now, I'm lucky in that that situation doesn't happen to be very often. What happens a lot more often is people don't finish the class. If we have 4 or 5 days set up for a decompression procedures class and they're not able to meet the requirements at the end of those days, then the course will get extended or just pushed back to another trip. So the primary reasons that people don't finish in the time that we have set up is they show up unprepared or unexperienced. Unprepared being things like showing up with brand new equipment that they haven't used before. Deco class is not when you get to try out new gear. That should have been taken care of by a mentor. It should have been taken care of in Intro to Tech. Deco class is not where we do that. Unexperienced would be when we don't have the dive experience to go be doing these kinds of dives. If you haven't done a whole lot of diving to 100 feet or 30 meters deep, then decompression class probably isn't where you need to be. You need to go out and do those no decompression limit dives to get experience at depth and to get comfort underwater. And maybe there's a third category, and that would be people who skip out on the whole intro to tech or mentorship part. They live in an echo chamber and diving, they hang out with a couple of buddies, they read some stuff online, and they think they've got it dialed in already, but aren't, because they haven't expanded their sphere of diving outside of, let's say, the local quarry. Now, whichever reason it is, if you don't finish the Deco class and the time that we have set aside, that's a conversation that we have to extend the class. Maybe it's another day or two, maybe it's another trip. Whatever that is, that's a solvable problem. So this question of how do I not fail really becomes how do I show up so that I have success in the class? And the answer to that is really simple, and I've gone over it a bunch of times here. We need to have experience and we need to be prepared. Now, if you have those things, you've taken an intro to tech class, you've gotten some experience after, you've got good awareness underwater, and man, it's just really time to progress. Where do I go do this class? I'm primarily based in South Florida. So I go between South Florida and North Florida. I've got the awesome South Florida shipwrecks and the super cool North Florida caves. And along with the caves, there's plenty of springs, plenty of deep springs where theoretically you could do a decompression procedures class, but I prefer not to do that. I really prefer to do all the Deco classes that I can in South Florida. The reason for this is deep ocean shipwrecks where we have current, we have lines, we have boats, we've got a lot of environmental considerations to think of. That's real Deco diving. We can go to a quarry or a spring or even a really deep pool and technically check off all the boxes for decompression diving. But that doesn't give us a realistic, real-life ability to go do Deco dives in environments like South Florida. So while we can accomplish this class in a bunch of different locations, in my opinion, the best place to do it is an area where we can dive with environmental considerations, where we can do deco diving on a lawn, and where we can do deco diving as drift deco. And all three of those things happen to be in South Florida, and that's why I really love conducting my deco classes down here, because that's where we get to experience all three of those: the environmental considerations, line deco, and drift decompression diving. So that's a review of the entry-level decompression courses and the review of what gives people success and what causes people to not finish or even fail their decompression procedures course, whether that's advanced nitrox and deco procedures or advanced nitrox and heliotrox. So if you're interested in signing up for a program like that, you can give me a holler. Even if you're not interested in coming and seeing the world-class shipwrecks and reefs that we have down here in South Florida, you can always shoot me a note, and I'm happy to give you advice on other locations or other instructors that are good to use for deco training. So thank you for watching.